Welcome back to the Monster Bass channel, guys. My name's Tyler Berger with Bass Fishing HQ, and today we're doing a type of fishing that I absolutely love. And it's a summertime, the sun is really overhead, and it's really hot. And one of the best things that you can target when it comes to that summertime bass fishing is shade. So we've gotten back into some canals, we're seeking out shade lines, and that's how we're gonna catch our bass today. You know, in bass fishing, one of the best times to actually catch a fish is during low light conditions. That's why the morning tends to be really good and the evening tends to be really good. But something that you can do kind of to duplicate that throughout the day is target shade lines. And if you look here, we've got some big trees, we've got a boat, we got a seawall. All these things are actually creating shade lines in the water, and those bass will really get sucked up into that shade because they don't want to be out in the sun either. And the other thing is it gives them a perfect place to ambush prey that's going by. If a little bluegill swims by, bam, they can reach out there and grab it. So anything that provides a little bit of shade, a lot of times it can be trees, a lot of times it can be boats, but anything that provides just a little bit of shade will suck those bass right up into it. So let's go over rod, reel, kind of the basics of what you will need. Obviously we have our catch popper right here. I typically like braided line with all of my topwaters, but anytime I'm using a topwater, I'm gonna use a small leader, usually about a foot, even shorter than this at time. And this is actually monofilament line. Monofilament floats, but that's not the reason I use it. I actually use it because sometimes when you cast with that braid, it's so limp, it's so limber, that braid will actually get hung around the front hook or on your hooks a lot. So using the monofilament, it's a little bit more of a taut line and it keeps the line from getting wrapped around those hooks. It just helps you to not make a huge long cast and have that bait get all fouled up. The other thing that I do like is there is a little bit of stretch here. And when you're fighting a fish and they dive real hard at the boat, you know, braid doesn't have any stretch. So having a little bit extra stretch will help you. But most of the power of a fish diving is gonna be absorbed by your rod. So when it comes to a rod, I think it really is important, not just for poppers, but all topwater fishing. I really like something around that 7 foot length. This particular rod is a 7'2" in length, and you can go smaller than that. The smaller you go with the rod, typically the more accurate you are. So if you had a rod that was just designated for fishing around cover like this, then going with a 6'8" or 6'9" would be great. Now the action of the rod, I really like a moderate bend, kind of that parabolic bend. That parabolic bend really helps pretty much anytime you're fishing treble hooked lures of any sort, whether it's a crankbait or a topwater. That parabolic bend just helps that bass to kind of stay pinned when it's up there and it's jumping. You don't want a fast action rod with your topwater baits. And then the reel is a simple 7.1 to 1 gear ratio reel. So when it comes to fishing shade lines, there's honestly a lot of different baits that you can use. You know, one of my favorites is actually using a frog, where you can kind of skip it into that shade line and catch bass. But what I've seen a lot of times, especially during later summer, is that those bass just tend to get conditioned to everybody throwing baits like a frog. They've seen so many different lures that a lot of times they'll come up to that frog and they'll just slap at the bait, but they won't get it and you miss them, and it's very frustrating. So something I do to alleviate that is use a popper. I really have kind of a similar action as that frog with a popper. I can keep it in that shade line for as long as I want. Again, because it's a popper, you know, I could pop it once, let it sit there for 5-10 seconds, pop it again, and I'm gonna keep it in that shade line for a long time, giving that, you know, non-aggressive bass more of a chance to come up there and catch it. And the best thing is, if they come up and just slap at this bait, they're gonna get those hooks and you're gonna be able to catch them. So that is why a lot of times I go with the popper during that summertime, that late summertime. A lot of times when you find these shade lines, there's still gonna be cover that is right up against the bank. If you look up here, we got a seawall, and the bass, although they're sitting in the shade, a lot of times they're gonna be right snug up against that seawall. Or if it's just a bank, they're gonna be really close to the bank. So again, leaving a bait in that area for a long time can be really crucial to getting more bites. And again, that's why I like the popper, because I can cast it out there. And this is the big thing. You want to make sure you're making accurate cast. You want to make sure that you're putting that bait as close to the bank as you can, because again, that's typically where the fish are. They're gonna be in that deepest, darkest shade that you have on the bank. With a popper, again, you can keep that bait in there a long time, which I think is so important for summertime bass. You know, spring bass, they a lot of times are gonna hit really quick because they're aggressive. In the summer, they tend to get a little bit more sluggish. So keeping that bait in front of them is so critical to catching more fish.